Chapter 1. The telegram arrived at precisely 10 minutes past 3, just as Hercule Poirot was adjusting the angle of his perfectly folded pocket square. He regarded the missive with mild displeasure, for interruptions, particularly unexpected ones, were a disruption to order, and Poirot disdained disorder in all its forms. Still, when one is a detective of his standing, such inconveniences are inevitable. With a resigned sigh, he reached for the envelope, slit it open with a silver letter opener, and read the terse message within. Urgent matter. Tragedy at Thornfield Grange. Your presence requested immediately. Discretion advised. Lady Eleanor. Willoughby. Ah, Poirot murmured, tapping the telegram against his fingertips. Thornfield Grange. A name that promises intrigue, non? From across the sitting-room, Captain Arthur Hastings, erstwhile military man, devoted friend and occasional chronicler of Poirot's cases, lowered his newspaper and raised an eyebrow. Never heard of it, he said. Sounds rather grand, though. Poirot nodded. It is the country estate of Lord and Lady Willoughby, an old and respectable family, with a lineage that extends back to the court of Queen Victoria. They are known for their wealth, their influence, and, if I recall correctly, a certain flair for melodrama. Hastings frowned. And what's this tragedy, then? Poirot pursed his lips. That, my dear Hastings, is the question. But let us consider. A discreet request, a house of prominence, and a sudden calamity. It suggests a scandal, n'est-ce pas? And one which, I suspect, they would rather not see in the morning papers. Hastings, who had long since learned to trust Poirot's instincts, sighed. I suppose this means we're off to the countryside. Poirot allowed himself a small, knowing smile. Precisely. Pack your bags, mon ami. We have a mystery to attend to. Chapter 2. The journey to Thornfield Grange was undertaken with the efficiency and punctuality that Hercule Poirot demanded of all his affairs. The countryside, with its rolling hills and crisp autumn air, did little to charm him. Nature, after all, was inherently untidy. Hastings, on the other hand, was quite taken with the scenery, though he had little time to admire it, as Poirot spent the majority of the trip speculating on the nature of the tragedy that had befallen their hosts. It is most curious, Poirot mused, adjusting his gloves as their car rumbled along the private road leading to the estate. The phrase tragedy is a careful one, non? It is not a crime nor an accident, merely a tragedy. A word of discretion. It suggests that Lady Eleanor Willoughby herself is uncertain of how this event should be classified. Hastings, watching the towering structure of Thornfield Grange appear beyond the mist, frowned. You think she suspects foul play, but has no proof? Poirot shrugged. Or perhaps, mon ami, the tragedy is of such a nature that it is difficult to speak of directly. As the car pulled up to the grand entrance, they were greeted by a tall, stiff-jawed butler, whose years of service had clearly imbued him with the ability to betray no emotion, even in the face of calamity. Lady Willoughby awaits you in the drawing-room, Monsieur Poirot, he announced, leading them inside. Thornfield Grange was as grand as one might expect. Dark wood panelling, ancestral portraits lining the halls, and the unmistakable scent of old wealth clinging to every corner. Poirot took in the details with his usual scrutiny. "The house is silent," he murmured. Hastings glanced at him. "I should think so. The family must be in mourning, if what happened was truly serious." Poirot made a non-committal noise. "Perhaps." The drawing-room was a stately chamber, adorned with gilded mirrors and velvet drapery. At its centre, a woman sat rigidly in an armchair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Lady Eleanor Willoughby was an imposing figure, tall, silver-haired, and aristocratic in every sense of the word. Yet her expression, though composed, bore the unmistakable weight of distress. "Monsieur Poirot!" Her voice was clipped, as if she were forcing herself to remain controlled. "Thank you for coming." Poirot inclined his head. "It is my duty, madame. You spoke of a tragedy." Lady Willoughby inhaled sharply. "A most dreadful one. My niece, Beatrice, was to be married in a week's time. Last night—" Her voice faltered for the first time. "Last night she was found dead." Hastings, who had been shifting his weight impatiently, let out an audible exclamation. "Dead?" Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You will forgive me, madame, but I must ask, what was the cause?" Lady Willoughby looked away. "That is just it, Monsieur Poirot. The doctor says she died of no apparent injury or ailment. She was found in her wedding gown, laid out as if prepared for burial, inside an empty coffin." A silence fell upon the room. Even Poirot, who had encountered many strange deaths in his career, seemed to absorb the weight of the revelation. "In a coffin?" Hastings repeated, stunned. "You mean someone placed her there?" Lady Willoughby's hands trembled. It was one of the old family coffins, kept in the lower vaults of the estate. No one knows how she got there. The door to the crypt was locked from the outside, yet she was inside, lifeless. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his mind already moving swiftly. "Tell me, madam, what was your niece's temperament of late? Had she seemed unwell, distressed?" Lady Willoughby hesitated. "She was nervous, yes, but she had every reason to be. There had been—" She paused, her voice dropping. "Incidents." "Incidents?" Lady Willoughby straightened, as if reluctant to speak further. "Someone had been leaving notes for Beatrice. Notes warning her not to go through with the wedding." Hastings' eyes widened. "Threats?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not threats. They simply urged her to reconsider, spoke of terrible consequences." Poirot studied her carefully. "And did she take them seriously?" "She dismissed them at first, said they were nothing but mischief. But the last note, that one frightened her." "And what did it say?" Willoughby's lips tightened. "It said, 'A bride in white shall sleep in the tomb before she weds.'" Poirot's expression did not change, but Hastings could tell that he had seized upon something. "And where is this note now?" "Beatrice burned it." "Ah," Poirot murmured. "How convenient." Lady Willoughby stiffened. "Are you suggesting—" "I suggest nothing, madam, but only seek to understand. Who discovered her body?" Lady Willoughby swallowed. "Her fiancé, Lord Richard Winthrop." "And his reaction?" She hesitated. "Grief-stricken, of course." "Of course," Poirot echoed. "And was it he who alerted the household?" "Yes, he raised the alarm." Poirot tapped his chin. "Then, if I understand correctly, this young lady was found in an impossible situation, locked inside a crypt, inside a coffin, with no sign of violence upon her, and yet You do not accept that. This was merely an unfortunate death. Lady Willoughby's fingers curled into the fabric of her dress. I knew Beatrice. She was young, full of life. She did not simply crawl into a coffin and die, Monsieur Poirot. Someone put her there. Poirot inclined his head. Then we shall find out who. A knock at the door interrupted them. The butler entered. Madam, Lord Winthrop has arrived. Lady Willoughby's jaw tightened. Show him in. Moments later, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s stepped inside. His face was pale, his dark eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Lady Willoughby, he said, his voice hoarse. Then, seeing the strangers, he hesitated. Lady Willoughby gestured. This is Monsieur Hercule Poirot. He has agreed to investigate Beatrice's death. Lord Winthrop's gaze flickered toward Poirot, and for the briefest moment something unreadable passed over his features. Poirot stepped forward. My condolences, Lord Winthrop. I understand you were the one to discover Mademoiselle Beatrice's body. Winthrop's throat bobbed. Yes, it was. I still cannot believe it. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, watched him closely. Then perhaps, monsieur, you would be so kind as to tell me everything. Chapter 3. Lord Richard Winthrop hesitated before stepping further into the drawing-room. His posture was stiff, his face pale with exhaustion and grief. Yet beneath the mask of mourning, Poirot detected something else. A subtle tension in the set of his jaw, the way his fingers curled slightly at his sides. It was a look Poirot had seen many times before. A man not merely burdened with sorrow, but with secrets. Please. Lady Willoughby gestured toward a chair. Sit. Winthrop lowered himself into the seat, but his hands remained clenched on his knees. His gaze flickered to Poirot, his expression wary. You're here to investigate Beatrice's death. Poirot inclined his head. Oui, monsieur. It is my duty to understand the truth of what happened to Mademoiselle Beatrice. The circumstances, they are, how shall I say, unusual. Winthrop let out a breath, shaking his head. Unusual? That's one way to put it. His voice was hoarse. I don't understand any of it. It doesn't make sense. Poirot observed him carefully. Then perhaps you would do me the great kindness of recounting the events as you experienced them, monsieur. Step by step, if you please. Winthrop exhaled slowly, his gaze lowering as he gathered his thoughts. I arrived at Thornfield Grange in the afternoon yesterday. I had planned to spend the evening with Beatrice. We were to finalize some wedding arrangements, but she wasn't in the house. Lady Willoughby interjected. We assumed she had gone for a walk in the gardens. She often did. Winthrop nodded. But when she didn't return for dinner, we became worried. We searched the house, the grounds. There was no sign of her. His voice faltered. Then I thought of the crypt. Hastings frowned. The family crypt? Why would you think of that? Winthrop rubbed a hand over his face. Because of the notes, the warnings. Poirot's expression remained neutral. Ah, so you knew of them? Winthrop's jaw tightened. Of course I knew. Beatrice told me. She laughed them off, but I could tell she was uneasy. And then the last note. The one she burned? Poirot prompted. Winthrop hesitated. Yes. What did it say exactly? A pause. Then, reluctantly, a bride in white shall sleep in the tomb before she weds. Silence stretched in the room. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings before turning back to Winthrop. And so, when Mademoiselle Beatrice was missing, you immediately thought of the crypt. Winthrop's throat bobbed. Yes, I took a lantern and went down there myself. The crypt is always locked, but the key is kept in the study. And you retrieved it? Yes. Poirot tilted his head. And when you entered? Winthrop's breath hitched. His hands curled into fists. She was there, inside one of the old coffins, lying so still, so pale, her wedding dress. He trailed off, his voice breaking. Hastings looked horrified. Was the coffin already open? No. Winthrop whispered. It was shut. A heavy silence filled the room. Poirot, however, remained unshaken. His little grey cells were at work, piecing together the fragments. So, monsieur, he said, voice calm, you are telling me that Mademoiselle Beatrice was inside a coffin, one that was closed, and the crypt was locked from the outside? Winthrop nodded. And yet, Poirot continued, someone must have placed her there. Winthrop looked up sharply. What are you implying? Poirot spread his hands. Simply this. If Mademoiselle Beatrice was placed inside the coffin, then it means she was not alone. Someone else was in that crypt before you arrived. Winthrop swallowed hard. Then where did they go? The door was locked. There was no one there. Poirot's gaze did not waver. That, monsieur, is what we must discover. A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. The butler stepped in, his expression composed but alert. Madame, the doctor has arrived to examine the body, Lady Willoughby exhaled. Very well, show him to the crypt. Poirot rose. If you permit, madame, I should like to accompany him. Lady Willoughby hesitated, then nodded. Of course. The crypt was situated at the far end of the estate, past the gardens and down a sloping path. It was an old structure, built of weathered stone, its iron gates streaked with rust. The doctor, a balding man with a sharp nose, was already there when Poirot and Hastings arrived. A constable had also been summoned, standing stiffly at attention. Dr. Edwards, Lady Willoughby introduced, Monsieur Poirot will be assisting in the investigation. Dr. Edwards adjusted his spectacles and peered at Poirot. A detective, is it? Well, I suppose we can use all the help we can get. This is a baffling case, to be sure. The heavy crypt door groaned as it was unlocked and swung open. Poirot stepped inside, taking in the dim interior. Rows of stone coffins lined the walls, their engravings faded with age. At the centre of the chamber lay a single wooden coffin, its lid slightly askew. Poirot moved forward, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. The white fabric of Beatrice's wedding gown was stark against the dark wood. Her hands were folded over her chest, her golden hair spilling over the sides. Her face was eerily peaceful. Dr. Edwards cleared his throat. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle. It's as if she simply stopped living. Poirot bent closer. His fingers traced the edge of the coffin, then moved to Beatrice's wrist. He adjusted her sleeve slightly, revealing a faint discoloration near the skin. Ah, he murmured. Hastings peered over his shoulder. What is it? Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he straightened, his expression unreadable. Tell me, Dr. Edwards, Did you notice any peculiar scent when you examined the body? Dr. Edwards frowned. A scent? Yes, a faint, almost floral aroma, but tinged with something bitter. The doctor's eyes widened slightly. Now that you mention it, yes, there was something. I couldn't quite place it. Poirot's lips pressed into a thin line. That, mes amis, is the scent of belladonna. Lady Willoughby inhaled sharply. You mean? Poirot turned to her, his gaze sharp. Mademoiselle Beatrice was poisoned. Gasp rippled through the group. Hastings swore under his breath. But how? Winthrop demanded. Who would do such a thing? Poirot clasped his hands together. That, monsieur, is the question. And I believe the answer lies not just in this crypt, but in the secrets Mademoiselle Beatrice kept before her death. He turned back to the body, his expression darkening. For someone wished to make certain she would never walk down the aisle. Chapter 4. The air inside the crypt grew heavy with silence. The faint flickering of the lanterns cast elongated shadows against the stone walls, making the ancient engravings appear almost alive. Poirot straightened, his keen eyes studying every detail of the scene before him. Lady Willoughby pressed a hand to her chest. Poisoned! Her voice trembled. But who would do such a thing? Winthrop clenched his fists, his face a mixture of shock and fury. Beatrice had no enemies. There's no one who would... He stopped, swallowing hard. Poirot turned to him, his expression calm but piercing. Are you quite certain of that, monsieur? Winthrop hesitated. I thought so. Poirot said nothing for a moment, letting the weight of his question settle. Then, without another word, he bent over Beatrice's body once more, his fingers delicately lifting a strand of her golden hair. There is something very strange here, he murmured, something that does not fit. Hastings, who had been standing stiffly by the doorway, exhaled. Everything about this case is strange, Poirot. Mais non, mon ami. Poirot straightened, brushing off his coat. There is always order. In chaos, a pattern within every mystery. We must simply find it. Dr. Edwards cleared his throat. Poirot, if she was poisoned, how do you suppose it was administered? There is no sign of any glass or cup from which she might have drunk. Poirot nodded approvingly. An excellent observation, Doctor, and one that leads us to our next question. Where was Mademoiselle Beatrice before she came to the crypt? Lady Willoughby bit her lip. She had tea in the drawing-room that afternoon. Then she went to her room to rest. That was the last I saw of her. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Tea, you say? The lady hesitated. Yes, she always took her tea in the afternoon. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. Then it is there we must begin. If the poison was introduced through her tea, it may still be in the house. Winthrop looked pained. You think someone in the household did this? Poirot lifted a brow. It is a distinct possibility, monsieur. Unless you are suggesting that a stranger wandered into Thornfield Grange, prepared a cup of poisoned tea, and then vanished without a trace. Winthrop's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot turned briskly to the butler, who had been standing quietly in the corner of the crypt. You, monsieur, you served the tea, yes? The butler, an elderly man with deeply lined features, nodded. Yes, sir. I prepared the tray myself, and took it to the drawing-room. Poirot studied him closely. Did Mademoiselle Beatrice take the tea alone? The butler hesitated. No, sir. She was with Mr. Winthrop at the time. All eyes turned to Winthrop. His expression darkened. I had tea with her, yes. Poirot's voice remained measured. Did you drink from the same pot? Yes. A small frown appeared on Poirot's face. And you suffered no ill effects? Winthrop's lips pressed into a thin line. No. Poirot tapped his chin thoughtfully. Then we must consider another possibility. If the poison was in the tea, but only affected Mademoiselle Beatrice, it suggests something quite precise. A substance targeted specifically to her. Dr. Edwards frowned. You mean something like belladonna, but given in a form where only she would ingest it. Précisément. Poirot turned toward the butler once more. Tell me, was there anything unusual about the tea that day? Different brand, a particular flavour. The butler shook his head. No, sir. It was the same as always. Earl Grey, as she preferred. The only addition was the honey. Poirot's eyes lit up. Ah, honey, you say? The butler nodded. Yes, sir. Mademoiselle Beatrice always took honey in her tea, while Mr. Winthrop preferred his plain. Poirot clapped his hands together. Then we are close, mes amis. If the poison was not in the tea itself, but in the honey, then only Mademoiselle Beatrice would have consumed it. Hastings let out a low whistle. That would mean someone tampered with the honey before it reached her. Lady Willoughby turned, pale. But who would do such a thing? Poirot's expression turned grave. That is what we must uncover. But tell me, Lady Willoughby, where is the honey kept? In the pantry, she whispered, along with the rest of the kitchen supplies. Poirot turned sharply. Then let us waste no time. Hastings, we must examine that honey at once. Back at the manor, the pantry was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of spices, dried herbs, and preserved fruits. Poirot moved swiftly, scanning the shelves with precision until he found a small glass jar labelled lavender honey. Carefully, he lifted the lid and sniffed. His nose wrinkled ever so slightly. Mon Dieu! Dr. Edwards stepped forward. What is it? Poirot's fingers dipped a silver spoon into the honey, lifting a small amount to the light. He tilted it carefully, watching how it dripped. Then, with deliberate caution, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small strip of paper. What are you doing? Hastings asked. Poirot smiled faintly. A little test, mon ami. He dipped the paper into the honey, waited a moment, then withdrew it. Slowly, before their eyes, the paper turned a faint shade of violet. A collective gasp. Poirot's expression hardened. As I suspected, belladonna. Lady Willoughby pressed a hand to her lips. Then someone deliberately laced Beatrice's honey with poison? Yes, Poirot said softly. And that someone is among us, Winthrop exhaled sharply. Then find them, Poirot. Find them and make them pay. Poirot's gaze never wavered. Oh, mon cher monsieur, rest assured, I will. Chapter 5. The study at Thornfield Grange was steeped in an oppressive silence. Heavy bookshelves lined the walls, their aged spines a testament to the estate's long history. Poirot sat primly in a high-backed chair, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Across from him, Lady Willoughby and Winthrop sat stiffly, their faces still pale from the discovery in the pantry. Dr. Edwards leaned against the fireplace, his arms crossed. "So, Poirot, where do we go from here? We know the honey was poisoned, but how do we determine who did it?" Poirot sighed, his fingertips tapping lightly against the armrest. "Mon cher docteur, we must now consider the true implications of our discovery. The poison was administered through the honey, a most deliberate method. This tells us several things." He lifted one finger. First, the culprit had access to the pantry, and knew that Mademoiselle Beatrice alone used the honey. A second finger. Secondly, they were confident that no one else would accidentally consume it before she did. A third. And finally, they were patient, willing to wait for her to ingest the fatal dose at the right moment. Hastings frowned. "That does narrow it down, doesn't it? I mean, it has to be someone in the house. A stranger wouldn't know her habits so well." "Précisément, Hastings." Poirot nodded. "This crime is one of intimate knowledge, not opportunistic chance." Lady Willoughby's voice was barely above a whisper. "Then it must have been one of us." Winthrop slammed his fist on the desk. "This is madness. Someone under this roof murdered my fiancée. I refuse to believe it." Poirot's sharp gaze locked onto him. "And yet, monsieur, the evidence does not require your belief. It merely exists." Winthrop opened his mouth, but seemed to think better of whatever retort he had prepared. Instead, he sank into his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. Poirot stood, adjusting his cuffs. Now, we must ask ourselves, who had reason to want Mademoiselle Beatrice dead? Hastings exhaled. "From what I can see, she was well liked by everyone." Dr. Edwards, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "There is something you may not know." All heads turned toward him. "What do you mean, Doctor?" Poirot asked. Dr. Edwards hesitated. "I had spoken with Beatrice a few days ago in private. She was troubled, deeply troubled." Winthrop stiffened. "Troubled about what?" The doctor's expression was grim. "She was afraid. She believed she was being watched." A chill ran through the room. Hastings swallowed. "Watched? By whom, Doctor?" Edwards shook his head. "She never said, but she told me she felt unsafe in the house, that someone had been in her room while she was away." Lady Willoughby gasped. "That's absurd. Are you suggesting someone was spying on her?" Poirot remained thoughtful. "Did she mention anything specific, Doctor? Anything missing? Anything moved?" Dr. Edwards frowned. "Only one thing. She said a letter had gone missing." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "A letter, you say? And did she tell you what was in it?" "No. Only that it was important. She intended to confront someone about it." Poirot tapped his chin. "Fascinating. A missing letter, a sense of being watched, and a poisoning that required meticulous planning." Winthrop gritted his teeth. "Poirot, if you know something, say it." Poirot turned to the butler, who had been standing discreetly by the door. "Tell me, monsieur, who else has access to the pantry?" The butler bowed slightly. "Only myself, the cook, and the housemaid, sir." Poirot's gaze flickered toward Lady Willoughby. "And you, madame?" She looked taken aback. "Me? Why would I go into the pantry?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Oh, I do not suggest you poison the honey, madame, but surely, as the lady of the house, you have access, n'est-ce pas?" She hesitated. "Yes, of course, but I had no reason to go in there." Poirot nodded slowly, as if filing the response away for later. Then he turned back to the butler. "And the housemaid? Where is she now?" The butler shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Alice? She's in her quarters, sir. Shall I fetch her?" Poirot's lips curled upward. "Oui, monsieur. I believe it is time we had a word with her." A few minutes later, Alice stood before them, twisting her apron nervously. She was a young woman with dark hair and wide, frightened eyes. Poirot regarded her kindly. "Mademoiselle, I will not keep you long. I simply wish to ask, did you notice anything strange about Mademoiselle Beatrice in the days before her death?" Alice hesitated. I don't know if I should say, sir." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "I assure you, mademoiselle, anything you tell me may be of the utmost importance." She swallowed hard. "I did see something odd the day before she died. When I went to clean her room, I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a letter in her hands. She looked shaken." Winthrop leaned forward. "A letter? What did it say?" Alice shook her head. "I don't know, sir, but she asked me something peculiar." Poirot's brows lifted. "And what was that, mademoiselle?" Alice hesitated. "She asked me if anyone had been in her room while she was out." A tense silence settled over the room. Poirot's expression remained unreadable. "And had there been?" Alice's hands twisted in her apron. "I don't know, sir. But that night, when I passed by her door, I heard her whisper to herself. Just one sentence." "What sentence?" Hastings asked, his voice barely above a murmur. Alice's lips trembled. "I know who you are now." A collective shudder ran through the room. Poirot straightened, his eyes sharp with realization. "Mes amis, I believe we are much closer to the truth than we think." Chapter 6a. Tense silence lingered in the Étudiant's study, each person lost in their own thoughts. Poirot's fingers tapped rhythmically against his armrest, his mind weaving together the delicate threads of deception that surrounded Beatrice's death. Alice, the housemaid, stood wringing her hands, her last words still hanging heavy in the air. "I know who you are now." Hastings cleared his throat. "Poirot, that changes everything. If Beatrice recognized her killer before she died, then this wasn't just an opportunistic crime. It was personal." Poirot nodded. "Mais oui, Hastings. That phrase, it is most intriguing, is it not? It tells us two things. One, that Beatrice was not merely suspicious, but certain of the identity of someone who meant her harm. And two, that she did not have time to act on that knowledge before she was silenced." Winthrop shifted uncomfortably. "Are you saying she was killed because she figured it out?" Poirot spread his hands. "It seems increasingly likely." Lady Willoughby dabbed at her temples with a silk handkerchief. "But this is all so dreadful. Who in this house would Beatrice have feared?" Poirot studied her keenly. "That is precisely the question we must answer, madame." Hastings frowned. "You said earlier that the crime required intimate knowledge, someone who knew Beatrice's habits. But if she knew who was after her, why wouldn't she have told anyone?" Dr. Edwards, who had been standing near the fireplace, finally spoke. "Perhaps she intended to. If she was planning to confront someone, she might have been gathering proof before making an accusation." Poirot nodded approvingly. "Just so. Doctor, it is often the fatal mistake of those who believe themselves clever. They wait too long. Winthrop exhaled sharply. So what do we do now? The police are still convinced this was an accident, aren't they? Poirot waved a hand dismissively. The police, mon ami, are always quick to settle for the obvious answer. But we must continue. There is a missing letter, a sense of being watched, and now the knowledge that Beatrice had uncovered something moments before her death. The pieces, they begin to fit together. He turned to Alice. Mademoiselle, you have done well to speak. Now tell me, where was the last place you saw the letter? Alice swallowed hard. On her nightstand, sir. But when I went to clean her room the next morning, it was gone. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Gone? And no one saw anyone enter or leave her room? She shook her head. No, sir, but I did find something odd. Hastings leaned forward. What was it? Alice hesitated, then pulled something from the pocket of her apron. A single pearl, smooth and luminous, resting in her palm. Poirot took it delicately, examining it with interest. Where did you find this? In the carpet by the fireplace, she whispered. I didn't think much of it at first, but now... Lady Willoughby gasped. That's from my pearl necklace. Winthrop turned to her, startled. You're sure? She nodded, a hand flying to her throat. I noticed it had come loose 2 nights ago, but I didn't think it had fallen off completely. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Fascinating. And where were you on the night in question, madam? She stiffened. In my room, of course. Why would I be in Beatrice's? Poirot's expression was unreadable. Perhaps you were not. But someone, it seems, was. Dr. Edwards cleared his throat. Forgive me, Poirot, but does a single pearl truly tell us anything? Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, mon cher docteur, even the smallest clue can reveal everything, if one knows how to look. Hastings frowned. Then what's next? Shh! Slipped the pearl into his pocket and rose. Next, we see if we can find that missing letter. Chapter 7. The drawing-room was dimly lit, the glow from the fireplace casting long, wavering shadows across the walls. Poirot sat upright in a velvet armchair, his fingers steepled, eyes half-closed in deep contemplation. Across from him, Hastings paced, his frustration barely concealed. I say, Poirot, this is maddening. We know Beatrice had a letter. We know she recognized her killer, and now we've found a pearl in her room. How does it all fit together? Poirot opened one eye. Patience, mon ami. The pieces of the puzzle, they are not to be forced. They must settle into place naturally. Hastings groaned and flopped onto the sofa. Well, I don't see how we'll find that letter now. If the killer took it, it's probably been destroyed. Poirot sat forward. Perhaps, or perhaps it is merely hidden where no one has thought to look. Hastings glanced at him warily. You have an idea? Poirot tapped his temple. I have a suspicion. But first, I must ask Alice something. The housemaid was summoned, her hands still, trembling slightly. Yes, Mr. Poirot. Tell me, mademoiselle, when you cleaned Beatrice's room, did anything else seem disturbed? Anything at all? Alice furrowed her brow. Well, now that you mention it, her jewellery box was unlocked. Miss Beatrice was always careful about that. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And did you look inside? Alice hesitated. No, sir, I was afraid to. Poirot rose abruptly. Then, my dear Hastings, let us remedy that mistake. The air in Beatrice's room was heavy with silence. Poirot approached the dressing-table and lifted the small mahogany jewellery box. With delicate fingers, he opened the lid. A tangle of gold chains, brooches, and earrings lay within. But Poirot did not reach for the jewellery. Instead, he ran his fingers lightly along the velvet lining. Then he smiled. Voila! With a deft movement, he pressed against the bottom panel. There was a faint click, and the false bottom slid open. Hastings let out a low whistle. By Jove, Poirot! A hidden compartment! Exactement, mon ami. Poirot withdrew a folded letter, its edges slightly crumpled. The paper was monogrammed with a delicate B.W., Beatrice Willoughby. Hastings leaned in eagerly as Poirot unfolded it. The ink was slightly smudged, but the words were still legible. I must speak to you at once. I have discovered something dreadful. I dare not write it down, but I cannot stay silent any longer. Meet me in the library tonight at midnight. I will explain everything then. The letter was unsigned. Hastings's heart pounded. Poirot! She was going to meet someone the night she died. Poirot's lips pressed into a thin line. And that someone, mon cher, is almost certainly her murderer. As they returned downstairs, Poirot motioned for Lady Willoughby, Winthrop, and Dr. Edwards to join them. Once assembled, he held up the letter. I believe this belongs to one of you. Lady Willoughby's face turned pale. Winthrop's jaw tightened. Dr. Edwards frowned. Hastings watched them closely. No one spoke. Poirot turned to Lady Willoughby. Madam, did Beatrice ask to meet you on the night of her death? She shook her head quickly. No, I was in my room the entire evening. I swear it. Poirot's gaze moved to Winthrop. And you, monsieur? Winthrop shifted uncomfortably. I was asleep by then. Finally, Poirot looked at Dr. Edwards. Doctor? Edwards hesitated. Then, in a low voice, he said, I was in the library that night. A stunned silence fell over the room. Hastings exhaled sharply. You were? Dr. Edwards nodded. Yes, but I wasn't meeting Beatrice. I never received this letter. Poirot's voice was dangerously soft. Then, Doctor, what were you doing in the library at midnight? Dr. Edwards's eyes flickered. I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to get a book. Poirot studied him unblinking. And did you see Beatrice that night? Dr. Edwards hesitated again, then shook his head. No, the library was empty when I got there. Hastings crossed his arms. A likely story. Poirot tapped a finger against his chin. Perhaps, or perhaps not. Then he turned back to the letter, rereading it carefully. His expression darkened. There is something very wrong here, Hastings. Hastings frowned. What do you mean? Poirot lifted his gaze, his eyes flashing with certainty. Mean, mon ami, that Beatrice did not write this letter. Chapter 8a. Hush fell over the drawing-room. The weight of Poirot's statement hung in the air like an executioner's axe. Hastings stared at him in disbelief. Poirot, what do you mean? If Beatrice didn't write that letter, then who did? Poirot turned the letter over in his hands, studying the ink, the paper, the minute details. Mon ami, observe carefully. The handwriting is similar, yes, but not identical. The pressure of the pen is inconsistent. Certain letters look at the M in must and the T in tonight, are formed differently than in Beatrice's other writings. Hastings squinted at the note. Dash it all, Poirot, I can't see much of a difference. Poirot gave a small, knowing smile. And yet it is there. The letter was written to appear as if Beatrice had penned it, but it is a forgery, a very careful, deliberate forgery. Lady Willoughby gasped, clutching at her pearls. But why? Who would do such a thing? Winthrop's voice was tight. More importantly, who was this letter meant for? Dr. Edwards, still pale from the revelation, spoke slowly. If the letter is a fake, then Beatrice might not have gone to the library at all. Someone lured her there under false pretenses. Poirot's expression darkened. Exactement. Someone wanted Beatrice alone that night. Someone who needed her out of her room, away from the safety of others. A deep, unsettled silence filled the room. Lady Willoughby's lips trembled. Then the murderer planned this. Poirot gave a solemn nod. Oh, très bien, madame. This was no crime of passion, no sudden fit of anger. It was calculated, premeditated. His gaze swept across the room, sharp as a scalpel. Our killer knew exactly what they were doing. The group dispersed in a daze, each lost in their own thoughts. Poirot and Hastings retired to Poirot's room, where he sat at the writing desk, deep in thought. Hastings, arms crossed, leaned against the fireplace. This changes everything, Poirot. If Beatrice never wrote that letter, it means she didn't choose to be in the library that night. She was led there. Poirot nodded. Oui, mon ami, which means her killer had control over the situation. They dictated the setting, the time, the circumstances. Hastings exhaled. But it doesn't tell us who. Poirot tapped his fingers against the desk. Perhaps not. But it tells us how the mind of our murderer works. They are clever. They are patient. And they are confident enough to assume they could forge Beatrice's handwriting without arousing suspicion. Hastings frowned. That narrows things down a bit. The killer must have had access to Beatrice's letters, something to study her handwriting. Poirot's eyes glowed. Exactement. You are learning, Hastings. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Poirot rose and opened it to find Alice, the housemaid, standing there, looking more nervous than ever. Mr. Poirot, she stammered, there's something I must tell you. I didn't say it earlier because I was frightened, but... Poirot gestured for her to continue. Alice swallowed hard. The night Miss Beatrice died, I heard something. I was coming up from the kitchen when I heard voices. 2 people arguing in the hallway near the library. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Did you recognize the voices? Alice hesitated, wringing her hands. One of them. I think it was Miss Beatrice. She sounded upset. The other voice, it was a man's. But he was whispering, so I couldn't tell who it was. Poirot nodded. And what did they say? Alice bit her lip. I only caught a little. Miss Beatrice said something like, You can't do this. I won't let you. And then the man said, You don't understand. I have no choice. A chill ran down Hastings's spine. My God, Poirot, whoever it was, Beatrice knew them. She was confronting them about something. Poirot's expression was unreadable. Oui, and it was a conversation of desperation, one of finality. Ellis looked miserable. I should have told you before. I'm sorry. Poirot gave her a reassuring nod. "You have done well, mademoiselle. Now tell me, after you heard this, what did you do?" Alice swallowed. "I hurried up the stairs. I didn't want to get involved." Poirot considered this. "And you heard nothing else? No cry? No struggle?" Alice shook her head. "No, just silence." Poirot dismissed her kindly, then turned to Hastings. "Now, mon ami, we have something very interesting indeed." Hastings's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Poirot steepled his fingers. "Our murderer is not merely a killer. They are a person backed into a corner. Someone who believes they had no other choice." Hastings felt a shiver run down his spine. "But Poirot, what could force someone to kill?" Poirot's voice was quiet but firm. "A secret, Hastings. A terrible, dangerous secret." He tapped the letter on the desk. "And I intend to find out what it is." Chapter 9. The atmosphere at Windermere Hall had shifted. The weight of suspicion pressed against the walls like an oppressive fog. The guests moved with wary glances, conversations hushed, and the sense of looming revelation thickened. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, followed Poirot closely as they descended the grand staircase, his mind still reeling from Alice's revelation. "Poirot, you said that the murderer was backed into a corner, that they had no choice," Hastings muttered. "But surely there is always a choice. Murder is not a necessity." Poirot's moustache twitched as he adjusted the cuffs of his immaculately pressed sleeves. "Ah, mon ami, you see the world in black and white, but crime, true crime, is woven in shades of grey. A person who kills believes, at least in that moment, that there is no other way. Pourquoi? That is what we must uncover." Before Hastings could reply, a sharp voice cut through the tense silence of the hall. "Mr. Poirot!" Lady Willoughby approached, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Something dreadful has happened, Mr. Winthrop. He is gone." Poirot's eyes darkened. "Gone? What do you mean, madam?" Lady Willoughby pressed a hand to her throat. "This morning he was seen taking his coat and leaving through the servants' entrance. He did not say a word to anyone. The groundskeeper saw him heading toward the cliffs." Hastings stiffened. "The cliffs? But that's dangerous terrain, especially in this fog." Poirot nodded grimly. "And what did you do when you learned of his departure?" "I sent 2 of the men to search for him at once," she replied. "But, Mr. Poirot, I fear something terrible may have happened." Poirot and Hastings exchanged a glance. Winthrop had been acting strangely ever since Beatrice's death, his nervous energy barely concealed behind a mask of composure. Was he running? Or was he another victim in this sinister game? "We must find him," Poirot said, his voice quiet, but firm. The cliffs near Windermere Hall loomed ahead, their jagged edges lost in the morning mist. The sea crashed against the rocks below, a violent reminder of the peril that lay beneath. Hastings shivered as they trudged through the damp grass, the wind biting at their coats. A shout rang out. "Over here!" Poirot and Hastings hurried toward the voice, finding one of the searchers, Mr. Langley, the stable-master, standing at the edge of the cliff, pointing downwards. Hastings peered over the edge and felt his stomach drop. There, several feet below, sprawled across the jagged rocks, was Winthrop. His body was twisted unnaturally, his limbs splayed. The waves lapped hungrily at his shoes. Poirot knelt, peering intently. He fell. Hastings swallowed. But was it an accident, or something more? Poirot's gaze sharpened as he surveyed the ground near the cliff's edge. "Look here, Hastings. The footprints." Hastings crouched beside him, squinting at the soft earth. 2 sets, one leading to the edge and another. His breath caught. Poirot! Someone else was here. Poirot's expression was unreadable. "Oui, mon ami. This was no accident." Lady Willoughby, who had followed them, let out a gasp and covered her mouth. "Mr. Winthrop! But why?" Poirot turned to her, his voice gentle but firm. "Because he knew something, madam. Something that made him a target. And now the murderer has ensured that he will never speak." A chill settled over them all. The game had taken another deadly turn. But Poirot's little grey cells were already at work. The truth was near. Chapter 10. The drawing-room at Windermere. Hall had been transformed into a stage for the final act of Poirot's investigation. Every suspect, every soul who had played a role in this twisted drama, was now seated before him, their eyes darting nervously, their hands gripping the arms of their chairs with barely concealed tension. The weight of Winthrop's death loomed over them, pressing down like a silent spectre. No one had spoken much since the body had been recovered. Even the police, standing at the doorway, seemed caught in Poirot's invisible web. Hastings, standing by the window, observed them all. The murderer was here. And within moments, Poirot would expose them. Poirot, standing at the centre of the room, let the silence stretch. Then he cleared his throat. "My friends, we have arrived at the final act of this terrible tragedy. A woman murdered on her wedding night. A man thrown from the cliffs. Lies, secrets, and yet, in the end, there is only one truth." His voice was calm, deliberate. His gaze swept over the suspects, and Hastings could see it. The momentary flickers of fear, of guilt, of desperate hope. "You see, mes amis, when Beatrice was killed, it was meant to appear as an accident. But it was never an accident. It was murder, deliberate and cold-blooded." Lady Willoughby flinched. Sir Reginald shifted in his chair. Alice gripped the hem of her dress. "Then we have the death of Mr. Winthrop," Poirot continued. "A man who, I believe, had begun to suspect the truth. And for that he was silenced. There was a sharp intake of breath. But before I reveal the murderer," Poirot said, his tone growing sharper, "let us return to the beginning, to the one detail that was overlooked." He paused. "The bridal gown." Hastings frowned. "The gown?" "Oui, Hastings, the gown. You see, when I examined it closely, I found something peculiar. Tiny, almost imperceptible stains on the lace, traces of a substance that should not have been there. Laudanum." A murmur rippled through the room. "Yes, laudanum," Poirot repeated. "A powerful sedative. Beatrice did not simply fall into that coffin. She was placed there after she had been drugged." His gaze locked onto Alice. "Miss Alice, you were the one who helped dress the bride, were you not?" Alice's lips parted. I did. "And yet it was not you who administered the drug. No, you were merely a bystander. The laudanum was introduced before the ceremony. and only one person had access to Beatrice for long enough to do such a thing. The room was silent. Poirot turned. "Sir Reginald!" A gasp escaped Lady Willoughby's lips. Sir Reginald's face turned ashen. This is absurd," he stammered. "No, Sir Reginald, it is logic. You knew that Beatrice was about to destroy you. You had forged documents. You had stolen from your estate to pay off debts. And Beatrice was your greatest mistake. You thought you could control her, but she learned the truth, did she not? She planned to leave you, to expose you." Poirot took a step forward. "And so you silenced her." Sir Reginald's hands clenched into fists. "You drugged her before the ceremony, knowing that later, when the wedding was over, she would be vulnerable. You planned to make her death appear as a terrible accident. But you were interrupted, were you not?" The man's breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. "Mr. Winthrop," Poirot continued, "was your greatest threat. He had seen something that night, something that led him to suspect the truth, and so you followed him to the cliffs, where you ensured he would never speak again." Sir Reginald shot up from his chair. "This is ridiculous! You have no proof!" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oh, but I do. You see, Sir Reginald, you made one mistake. A simple mistake, but one that only a man of my method would notice." The tension in the room was unbearable. Poirot reached into his pocket and withdrew a handkerchief. "This," he said, "was found at the site of Mr. Winthrop's death. A fine embroidered handkerchief, and on it the crest of your family." Sir Reginald paled. I must have dropped it earlier in the day." "No, monsieur." Poirot shook his head. "It was found near the freshest footprints at the cliff's edge, the ones belonging to you." A silence. Then Sir Reginald lunged. It happened in a flash. He made for the door, but the policemen were ready. With swift precision, they seized him, wrestled him back. "It was her!" he roared. "She ruined me. She deserved it." Poirot merely watched as the struggle ended. The murderer had been caught. The case was closed. Later that evening, as Hastings and Poirot prepared to leave Windermere Hall, Hastings let out a breath. "That was extraordinary, Poirot. Truly." Poirot smiled faintly, adjusting his cuffs. "Ah, mon ami, it is always extraordinary when the truth is revealed." They stepped outside into the cool night, and behind them the ghosts of Windermere Hall were finally at rest. The end.